Huddle around as Climbing the Pocket Network presents Jason and the boys talking everything Minnesota Vikings. Watch the countdown timer.
Away we go again. Lost like I'm lost on purpose. If found, please return to. Girl, don't you know I'm lost on the road? I've been here before. When I get home, girl, don't you know I'm lost on the road? I've been here before. When I get home, my vision blurry, I'm paying the cost. I'm not enough. In fact, it's even better when you're not involved. When I miss your call, I feel that I evolve. Cause as you mentioned, I am more dependent than a college student on their parents, or an old person on their pension. Not to mention, when you hit me on WhatsApp without attention, and a bad booty bitch watched and she looks tempting. Look, my Achilles heel is when I say what I feel. You say, baby, come home, and I don't think that I will. Cause all this motherfucking stress is gonna get me killed. Girl, don't you know I'm lost on the road? I've been here before. When I get home, girl, don't you know I'm lost on the road? I've been here before. When I get home,
Huddle around as Climbing the Pocket Network presents Jason and the boys talking everything Minnesota Vikings.
No, I can't play these games. No, you can't disrespect and call me names. Sending me signals like you about to switch lanes. Well, go on, do your thing. Go on, do your thing. I mix champagne and propane, get lit. I'm trying to forget all the things that you said, all the things that we did. Girl, don't you know I'm lost on the road? I've been here before. When I get home, girl, don't you know I'm lost on the road? I've been here before. When I get home, watch the breakdown. And I get home when I get home. You just gonna act like we normal now. Good luck. Don't you try to call me with that bullshit, telling me it's sorry. You act too quick. That's somebody else's problem now. You're somebody else's problem now. Don't you try to call me with that bullshit, telling me it's sorry. You act too quick. That's somebody else's problem now. You're somebody else's problem now.
Hey everybody, it's Dave here, and after 3 days off, missing Vlogmas, we're back to Vlogmas 2020 again. This time it's day 29, and for you, Climbing the Pocket Network has In the Huddle with your favorite, or some of your favorite, Climbing the Pocket Network personalities. And tonight, we're going to talk the Minnesota Vikings. It's all yours, Jason. You have a good one. I will be in the truck.
I don't know that Dave's full-fledged announcer voice intros will ever get old, but I'm just going to soak it all in. We're back. And
he said some of your favorite, some of our favorite. He looked right at Eric.
He was like, some of your favorites, and he just looked at Eric. So we're gonna jump right in.
I'm the one that sets expectations, guys. Like I feel like
nobody likes that guy.
I ruined Christmas. I am sorry for ruining everybody's Christmas. I hope everybody had a great time.
Your birthday that one time.
Miles got the hoodie on.
I'm just getting everybody back.
No, the hoodie's gone. I had to toss
the hoodie's gone.
All right, y'all. Well, let's jump into this thing. We do have the I'm gonna call him. He's now the hardest working man, not just in Vikings Twitter, because we get him for just a little bit, but he's out there spreading the message all around all of the NFL. The man, the myth, the legend, the doctor is back in the house. Eric, how you doing? How you been? Repping for Coastal Carolina. What's up, man?
My wife. So this is how my life goes, by the way. So I on Sundays watch all the games at the office. I stay from like 10 o'clock in the morning. We do our show. We watch all the games. We do Sunday Night Football with Chris. We help Kornacki with his thing, and then we do our podcast at midnight, end at 1 in the morning, and get home at 2. Sundays are a grind. Saturdays, I'm home by myself watching college football, and
you get the whole weekend. You get the whole weekend by yourself to watch football.
Yeah. I'm by college football is more of like my fandom at this point. And the funniest thing, so my wife, I say by myself, my wife and kids are in the other room, but like I bet so much on the Chanticleers this year that like I was rooting for them so much that my wife like mistake the idea that I was a fan of the Chanticleers and bought me this shirt. Now, in hindsight, this is a bomb ass color, and the Chanticleers is like a great name. So like I'm not mad. I'm just saying like she didn't read the room as well as I thought she might, and but I rock this now. This is like I wore this today the whole time. I wore it at the gym. Everybody is like, "Who are the Chanticleers?" I'm like, I'm explaining the Chanticleers to everybody, and it's been an eventful day.
Jason, we're gonna bring up that tweet. I saw you talking about like there's the article about white people only showering every other day or some shit like that. Eric wearing the same shirt from his workout earlier. Man, grimy as hell.
Dude,
and he admitted it. No shame.
Is that like the worst thing about like look, I'm gonna throw some empathy out there. I've never had to deal as a tall white male. I've never had to deal with the idea of being ashy. Like I throw out my privilege here just in like, yes, I can go a day without showering. And look, relative to
you may need to get your wife on the next pod to verify.
Exactly, right? Like I'm a piece of shit in like 2 different ways, right? I'm a piece because I'm a dude, right? So my job's infinitely easier than being a chick, right? But also like, I don't even have like it's weird. I can do this for like 3 days, and granted, I don't look great.
Just because you don't see your dry skin doesn't mean it's not there.
You can do it for 3 days.
It blends in better, right? It blends in
like
with
the
me,
Rick
and
Spielman
it's like,
of skincare.
Yeah,
right.
We got Drew here. We got Drew.
What up, Drew?
All right, well let's keep this thing going. Miles, I feel like you had some things you wanted to say, so I'm just gonna go to you next. How you doing? Have you showered in the last 24 hours?
Yeah, I definitely have. I'm not allowed to do that. Man,
I'm not saying I'm allowed. I'm saying somehow it passes.
Yeah, I guess.
No, come on, let's hurry up, y'all. People are already asking questions. I want to hear from me.
Hey, Flip's here for business. Hey, this is business only. No, I'm good. No, I just, I'm ready to kind of. I've been in 2021 mode with these Minnesota Vikings for a minute now. The Vikings hit 500 once, and that felt like it was by accident. And so we're about to talk about people are going to hate the negativity, but how can you sit here and tell me we're supposed to be positive about what we've seen? So I'm not going to sit here and
maybe Flip will give us the way.
Oh yeah, well, I'll let.
Oh no! Look,
Flip is our voice of optimism today.
People want bunnies.
I said it all year. All year, I told y'all, Mike Zimmer, get us to 8-8 or get the hell out of my state. And
laid up in California. I love it.
You think there's a difference between 6 and 10 and 7 and 9? Like, no, you didn't get to 8 and 8. So I'm not being optimistic. I'm on the fire everybody train. 6-10 is the same as 3-13 or
So
4-12.
proud of Flip right now. Jeez.
And-
Like I've seen Flip. I'm so proud right now. Like I'm
Yeah, I wish we had asked David. I
Christmas
wish we had
cheer
asked
for
David to
one, but
post
like
the,
also proud.
the handshake emoji or whatever
It's
that shit
like-
is. Put up on the screen.
accomplish one of your goals. The first goal in any season should be an above 500 record, if not a 500 record.
I thought it was
You really want to set the bar low. 8-8 is the goal, and so they didn't do that. 2020 is a failure. There's no ifs, there's no ands, there's no buffs. People want to talk about injuries. Bro, the Saints were injured. The Saints didn't have their wide receivers. The Bears were injured. Okay. The Browns have been injured. All these teams are injured now. So that's not an excuse. You failed, Mike Zimmer. You failed this year.
And that wasn't that like part of the deal, right? The part of the deal in 2020 was you're gonna deal with shit, right? Like New England had half their defense opt out, right? Like
They've won 6 games.
Injuries always happen, right? Like, and the deal was if you're going to would you guys have been fine if the Vikings just straight up said we're not going to compete this year? I would have been fine
because at least they're admitting it.
Well,
and I don't even mind the Kirk Cousins signing if everything else pointed towards the guys we're going to punt on this year. But the Yannick Ngakoue trade, when Yannick Ngakoue was traded to Minnesota, the Vikings were the Vegas favorites to win the NFC North. And to me, it was just they didn't, because again, this was a year, if you're not first, you're last in some sense. So if you're not a team that is going to be robust with respect to COVID opt-outs, injuries, schedule changes. The Vikings have had none of those, by the way. They other teams like Baltimore are going to make the playoffs despite having to play on a Wednesday and a Tuesday, right? But then if you don't think you're robust to those things, then you should have punted on the season, right? Because now we're hoping that Matt Stafford parties like it's 2011 and beats the Vikings so that they go 6-10 and end up with a decent draft pick, when in reality they should have been 3-13 and had Penei Sewell right in their lap, if not one of the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So Eric, can I ask you a question as you're talking about robust? Because this kind of brings us to something we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks when we talk about the Vikings and strategy and things like that. But it's something that gets talked about, and I'm not sure if we maybe are doing the best. We're not explaining it maybe in the best way, but you've written about it in recent times about building a robust team, not over investing in weak link systems like the offensive line, like the defense. But obviously after a season like this, where the Vikings offensive line was not good, that was obviously not good, most Vikings fans are looking at things and saying, hey, we need to go and spend whatever money we have left on those places, and all of our draft capital should go into those places right now because we're obviously bad in those places. And so some of us have been, saying we should maybe, Kirk's the guy, he's the quarterback, regardless of how you feel about Kirk Cousins, he's actually playing well. It's now 2 years in a row. He's playing, you could probably argue above the level of a supporting cast. Kirk Cousins is doing what he's supposed to do, even though he is being propped up. Can you help us understand why it potentially would be a smarter thing to invest in what's going on around Kirk Cousins, with the caveat that, yes, you need to throw the ball more and really go all in on that, versus we need every big name free agent offensive guard and we need to trade up in the first round to get, Wyatt Davis or something like that? Like, help us understand why those aren't the moves we should be making, because you've obviously written as to why those aren't the smartest things we should be doing.
Well, anytime you use like big capital positions on things, they have the possibility of going bust. And there's a couple considerations, right? Like there's the preventing ruin, and then there's the winning the Super Bowl, right? And the Vikings always seem more concerned with preventing ruin. And what I mean by ruin is like a 3-13 season, right? And so if that's the case, yes, spending a ton of money to prop up a non-premium position in the goals of preventing a 3-13 season, like that makes sense. But look, we're all in our 30s, 40, 40s, like the Vikings have never had a stretch of like 3 or 4 years in a row where they haven't been a relevant football team. This, like, at this point in time, every single person who's a Vikings fan wants to see a Super Bowl contender, and you have to be intentional about being a Super Bowl contender. And that, to me, is the biggest travesty of the Vikings. Is every Super Bowl contender that has happened in our lifetime has been sort of luck, and then we've backed it, so the Vikings have sort of gone and doubled down on it. So 2017, you're lucky to have the draft you had in 15, the draft you had in 16, and then everybody stay healthy for a whole year and get a great year out of a backup quarterback using a wide receiver who played in the NSIC with me and Miles, and one guy who was a 5th-round pick out of Maryland. And you said, okay, this is the formula. When in reality, no, you got lucky, and that was a fun run, and we all wish you would have won the Super Bowl, but you didn't. In 2009, it was Brett Favre wanted to play for the Vikings despite the Packers, and the Vikings got him at a relatively cheap deal, and he had the best season of his career. Like, that's not repeatable, and we saw it wasn't repeatable. In 1998, Randy Moss fell in your lap. Randall Cunningham had a great year off the bench, right? And then, like, literally Cunningham last 6 games of the next year. So every single Vikings run to the Super Bowl has been less than intentional. It's been lucky, and then they've sort of gone after that luck in unsustainable ways after. The way to build a Super Bowl caliber team is to make big bets where big bets are warranted: quarterback, wide receiver, head coach, and to spread the risk at every other position. Offensive line, any position where the other team can attack you, you spread the risk. Because look, I can spend $15 million on Riley Reif, and I can spend a 2nd-round pick on Brian O'Neill, and I can spend a 1st-round pick on Garrett Bradbury. But if my guards suck, the other team's defense can line their best rushers over the guards, and you're screwed. In the secondary, I can have the best corner in all football, and if I have 2 guys who shouldn't be in the NFL, good offenses are going to go after those guys. And so you spread your risk in those other places. And my issue with the Vikings in 2020 was they made a moderately sized bet on Kirk Cousins. They ended up making a big bet on Justin Jefferson, and that hit. Good for them. But everywhere else, it was sort of this, like, they really didn't understand that all of the roulette wheel spins that they were making in the secondary on the offensive line were dubious, and it ended up crashing their season.
Yeah, if I could just chime in, I think Vikings fans, as far as what we're looking at, going into 2021, I think the Atlanta Falcons are a really good case study on what can happen for a team that's trying to maximize a veteran quarterback's window and maximize, just making year to year bets on a defensive head coach. Because if you look at the Falcons, they were in the Super Bowl and they had the number 1 offense in the NFL with a great offensive coordinator. So they're up 28-3 in that game. They lose that game. Everyone knows the story. Next year, offensive coordinator leaves. They say, hey, we were just in the Super Bowl. Let's run it back. So they run it back, barely make the playoffs, lose on a last second play to the Eagles in the playoffs. Year 2, they say, okay, we're still competitive. Let's run it back. Year 3, they run it back. They go 7-9. And then year 4, trying to maximize veteran quarterback, Matt Ryan's great, but they're trying to maximize his window, and it's eroding around him. They go 7-9 in year 4, and now here they are. They never bounced back from that Super Bowl. They thought that their window was still open, when in reality it closed a long time ago. And you've got a veteran quarterback who's been non-competitive for 3 years now. You've got an interim coach, and you've got a 5-11 record at best. So that's what happens if you if you start thinking that your luck is repeatable, like Eric said.
Well, and that's the thing. Like Matt Ryan has actually played really well at times, but I think Flip,
Right.
your phrase of non-competitive is extremely right. Like Matt Ryan can play really well in a vacuum, but the team as a whole, like not compete because they have so many problems around, and and the coaching staff and everything, and it really does show. And again, I don't want to beat this dead horse, but like eventually, having a defensive minded coach is great to sort of get you out of the basin of extinction there. Like their defense was terrible and now it's good. And, but at some point, the Falcons should have signed Shanahan to be their coach. The Vikings should have signed Stefanski to be their coach, not necessarily because I think it's like, the best move on average, but it does increase their ceiling.
Hop in, Miles.
Question on that. Here's my question about the Stefanski situation. Stefanski's proven to be a really good head coach for the a basically joyless Cleveland Browns team for the last 20 years. He's found them joy. I'm hoping they make the playoffs, and then they're an entertaining team. I think the NFL would like to see them make the playoffs, just because it's been so long and they've been through so much. But with Stefanski, here's my question, Eric, and maybe anybody could chime in. Do we think there'd be a lot of difference with the Minnesota Vikings under Kevin Stefanski than there would be Mike Zimmer? And I say that on offense. And I say that because, I'll keep going here real quick. Do we think that the Vikings would still be an extremely run-heavy team? They are in Cleveland. They like to run the football a lot. Not that they won't throw. Do you think it's more of trying to help Baker and helping make sure that they hide Baker a little bit? Or do you think it'd be more of Kevin Stefanski just wants to run the football because that's kind of the philosophy he enjoys, but he also will, use analytics a little bit more to help him in other areas too? Like, I'm trying to find that balance with Kevin Stefanski because he left Minnesota being forced to run the football under Mike Zimmer, did a great job of it, got him a head coaching job in 2020 with the Cleveland Browns. But with the Cleveland Browns, he's running the ball as much or maybe even more than the Minnesota Vikings are. So I'm just curious, not that I don't think he would have been a really good head coach. I would have enjoyed to have a like-minded, like more of like a analytically, like someone that's just more forward-thinking in a Kevin Stefanski than a Mike Zimmer. So I very much appreciated that. But do we think Kevin Stefanski would have brought more of a modern take to the Minnesota Vikings?
I have to think. Look, I think Baker is a special case because I don't think he's anywhere near the quarterback Kirk is. So it's probably trying to hide him a little bit. Here's my question, and again, I do a fair amount of trolling on Twitter. I think my number one troll is this idea that Stephon Diggs was a cancer. Every single person I know who covers the Vikings says Diggs is a great human, and like all he wanted to do was win. And I think Stefanski staying probably would have kept him in Minnesota. And we have, an example in Randy Moss where all Moss wanted to do was win football games, and the Vikings thought he was a distraction. They got rid of him. Young Eric at the time said, "Oh, this will be great, right? Nate Burleson's ready to play football," and it's dumb as fuck, right? Like it's not like you don't trade superstar receivers in their prime, and they could have still gotten Jefferson. It's not against the rules. The Vikings drafted Moss when they had Jake Reed and Chris Carter. To me, I think the culture would have been different. There's also a secondary thing, which is you notice how Donnell Hunter basically mailed it. He basically said, "I'm not playing this season," after I think what it was a neck injury that could have probably helped him play later on. But you look at the team, you look at how Xavier Rhodes was treated. You look at how Mackenzie Alexander was treated. They played him in a game in week 17 last year that was meaningless, despite the fact he was banged up, and then he got injured, right? Mackenzie Alexander took a $4 million one-year deal from the Cincinnati Bengals instead of staying in Minnesota. Trey Wayne.
And he's played well, too.
Yeah.
And he's played well, and he's a good football player. And the Vikings should have wanted to keep him. But there were cultural issues in Minnesota that stemmed beyond just the run-first stuff. Namely, look how Zimmer treated Sharif Floyd when he got injured and like all that stuff happened. Mm-hmm. There was a cultural aspect to that team that winning covered up a little bit.
Yep, that's fair. 100%.
without winning, and every single person I talk to in the Vikings organization who I think aligns kind of similarly with us loves Stefanski. And I think that there's a human aspect of it where, I think that they just rally behind him a little bit more. And then, yes, I do think that they throw the ball more because I think Cousins and Stefanski believes this as well, probably, is just a much better quarterback than what Baker was coming out of year two.
Well, and that's fair. And that's why I asked the question, too. Yep.
Well, Stefanski in Cleveland, too. I mean, you look at Cleveland, they have an amazing offensive line. Nick Chubb is a beast. They got Kareem Hunt. And when you lose Odell Beckham like they did, there's also more of a reason for them to lean on that run game when their quarterback is struggling than possibly you have here in Minnesota. And you look at that, I mean, maybe the best game of the year, that Browns-Ravens game, when Stefanski had to open up his offense to win in a shootout, he went for it, and all the tricks were out of the bag. And you look here in Minnesota, it's you're going into a game against an amazing offense on Christmas Day. You know your defense is hurt. You can probably put 2 and 2 together that your defense is going to struggle in this one. And one solution there is to open up your offense to prepare for a shootout type of game. And we don't see that adjustment in Minnesota. We don't see them saying, oh crap, we're down 10 points in the first quarter. It's time to open things up. It's always, they've got to be down 14 or 21 before they actually start dropping back to pass.
The
and
Tennessee Titans are the closest thing to what the Minnesota Vikings do right now, in my opinion. They're the same way.
Titans, and
they
the
just
Titans,
have a better. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you're 100% correct, Miles. I mean, the Titans are what the Vikings want to be. And I think to myself, as somebody who, again, the Super Bowl should be the goal. The Titans, and I've been on a ton of, I've studied the Titans a ton this year. I have a decent amount bet on them winning the AFC South. I think, I won a bunch of bets on their over win total. Like, I like Tennessee. Kirk is a better player than Tannehill, in my opinion. Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook are about as talented as each other. The offensive lines are about the same now with the injuries that they've had. The defenses are equally bad. The Titans got some nice variance. When the Vikings were losing games by 1 and by 2, the Titans were winning them by 1 and by 2. And, one of them was against Minnesota at a US Bank Stadium. The Titans are going to make a humongous mistake after this year, which is to say, this is the formula for winning. And the problem is like, there's enough good components there to keep them above 6-10, 7-9 every year, but you're not going into Arrowhead and beating the Chiefs with the offense that is run, pass. You're not going into Lambeau and beating the Packers doing that stuff. And so I hate this because, again, the Vikings have been relevant our entire lives, right? Like you can count on one hand the number of years the Vikings have been bad our entire lives. The problem is that, and that might be the goal of ownership, right? And that's frustrating. But the Super Bowl is the ultimate goal, and unfortunately, I don't think that they're optimizing for that.
No, 100%, and that's where I struggle going into I view this last game of the season as just use this as an extended version of the preseason for yourself because you didn't get it. Throw some young guys in and let them play. I mean, there's no point in risking Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. I know people want the rookie record.
What about the record, Miles?
Right, exactly. I was just right. Like, I know people want it. And yes, it's cool
and the
to
yards
have
from scrimmage title. All of these really important things that we need to get.
The banner, hang a banner.
The hang the banners, right? That stuff's cool. It's fun. It makes you look back on the season and say, oh, they were at least able to do this in a shitty season. But at the end of the day, what this team needs to do is start looking forward. Now, do I expect them to move on from Mike Zimmer or Rick Spielman in the offseason? I don't. If they do, I'll be extremely surprised. But if they do, I think we'll start seeing a little bit more of a philosophical change that we've been talking about. Under Mike Zimmer, we're not going to see that. We're going to see them, like to Eric's point, this whole podcast and this whole show is the fact that we'll see a retread. They'll get themselves back into how how can we get ourselves back to being a playoff caliber team, not a Super Bowl caliber team.
We're going to play a third place schedule. And
right.
Well, no, but I mean,
let me finish up real quick. Yeah. They'll play, but like to your point, they'll play a third place schedule. They'll be in a situation where they'll get their defenders back. That the main excuses why 2020 didn't work. They'll get those players back. They'll add another player or two in the draft. They'll probably sign a guy here or there, depending. Like we'll see those things, and they'll be a better football team overall because they'll have more talent. Understandable. But we'll still see they'll see the exact same things we've seen. People will get extremely excited about a 10-6, 9-7, 11-5 team, and think, well, if we can just get to the playoffs, we'll make a run, because that's all we do. It's just hedge our bets on hoping that a run's going to happen at the right time, and that's what we saw in 2017. The run just continued, and they had a really good defense. But Mike Zimmer needs, for his philosophy to work, he needs them to infuse a whole bunch of talent into his defense and say, I need my defense to be a top 5, top 10 level defense. Otherwise, we're not going to get to where I think we should go. And we're talking about the offense. I'll finish up. This is my last point here. We're going to see them go into the offseason. They'll say, we'll get Hunter, Kendricks, Barr, all these guys back. We need to continue to add to those guys instead of going to the offensive side and say, we need to grow that group. They'll just go through and continue to say the defense needs to be the focal point, because the offense has been the last 2 drafts. So let's make sure that I get my players, because I need my defense to be elite. Otherwise, we're not going anywhere. And that's what we're going to see. And that's the frustrating part for me going into this end of the season here, is we're just going to continue to see retread after retread until there's a change that's made.
Well, so real quick, and Ted B, I saw you ask the question earlier, based on, one of the 15 minutes with flip shows. The idea of this 4th place schedule versus 1st place schedule has always been a myth. They're not that different. It's not going to get easier that next year. Next year's schedule is brutal. No favors at all. Arguably a harder schedule than they played this year. So if you're hoping that the Vikings...
I'm not a fan of strength of schedule stuff either. I'm not really a fan of that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they're playing the AFC North next year, and they're playing the NFC West next year. So
how's this team going to defend Lamar Jackson?
so we're talking Bengals. Okay, that's the easy one. But we're talking Browns, Steelers, Ravens, 49ers, Rams, Seahawks, and Cardinals. Okay, it's not getting any easier next year.
Stan, are you trolling? Are you trolling, Stan?
Well, I mean, you look at this. Like the AFC North. The AFC North might have 3 playoff teams this year. The NFC West might have 3 playoff teams this year. Like,
it's not getting any easier.
Yeah, the meat. Yeah, whether you end up playing, and I gotta get this right. Whether you end up playing Carolina or Atlanta is not that big of a difference. Whether or not you play, so it would be NFC East. Whether or not you play Philadelphia or Dallas or New York, it doesn't matter. Like, though you guys, but it's, to me, I think it's partially draft position. To me, it's also, I got to say this, and I bet a ton of money on the Vikings this week. The reason why is I think that they're a team that will try to get, they're a team that thinks 7-9 looks better than 6-10.
No, 100%.
And I feel like, and unfortunately, like I want them to try to lose, because that way I would know that they understand what's going on, right? Like, this isn't a game where they're choosing between winning and getting a playoff spot and losing and getting a better draft pick. This game means nothing to the Vikings, and so I want to see them start Sean Mannion. I want to see them play BC Johnson to make sure that they can't play. Exactly, and I honestly don't think they will. I think the history of the franchise.
What's so crazy, and I have to say this every week, but like, the roster just isn't that far away if they have a mentality and an offensive scheme and an offseason strategy that makes sense for 2020. That's all they need, because they got all these studs on the offensive side of the ball, and they're getting the defense back healthy. I mean, my Falcons example, when they made the Super Bowl, they were first in points scored and 27th in points allowed on the defensive side of the ball. So we can put together a decent defense with a truly top 7 offense.
I mean, you're preaching the choir, man. I mean,
they're not that far away.
But they're not going to commit to that, Flip. They're never going to under this regime.
That's what's so frustrating.
But to your point, Eric, I would hope the Wilfs have made up their mind of what they're going to do. I don't think they're going to fire Zimmer right after this season. So the whole point of that should be, if they've made up this game should not decide Zimmer's fate, right? That fate should have already been decided heading into a couple weeks ago or whatever. Like that fate should have that going into week 17. You're not vying for a playoff position right now. It's over. So that decision should have already been made. This week 17 game shouldn't determine jobs for the coaching staff and the front office. So to your point, Eric, throw in your backups, throw in the young guys that you want to see and see if they can progress and see if they show you anything heading into next season. This last game should only be about next year moving forward because it shouldn't be determining anything other than on-field play for guys you want to get a look at heading into next season because you didn't get a preseason and you've already made your decision whether your coaching staff and your front office are going to be here or not. That shouldn't determine that.
I'm just ready to get petty with it because at this point, look, if I'm the Wilfs, honestly, I'm saying Mike Zimmer, here's a list of players who are not going to play in this game, but that Christmas Day game was fucking embarrassing. So you're not playing any of these guys, and I want you to go win that game or you're out. I'm sorry. Win with the young guys you wanted so bad. Because here's the thing. Everybody's saying that Mike Zimmer isn't responsible because of all the injuries, that Rick Spielman, just bad luck. No, they built this team, okay? In Formula One, it's not just the driver, it's the team that builds the car. And so Mike Zimmer is crashing the car. Mike Zimmer is crashing the car that he built, okay? Hercules Mataafa sucks ass, okay? That's on Mike Zimmer, okay? Ifadio Denebo, nothing. That's on Mike Zimmer. Okay, all these backup linebackers, that's on Mike Zimmer. Dakota Dozier, that's on Mike Zimmer. All these crap-ass players, that's on him too. So don't tell me that they're an excuse to keep the guy. It's his fault while they're here in the first place.
So what is the thought that go ahead, Miles.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, the last thing I want to say, I've seen so much of football Twitter in general talk shit about shitty teams. That happens every year. And the Vikings shouldn't be absolved from that. I've seen so many people call for coaches how did I draw a blank on his name? Who's the coach for the Chargers?
Yeah,
Anthony Lynn. Anthony Lynn. Anthony Lynn has the exact same record as the Minnesota Vikings and the Los Angeles Chargers. And
they have way more because their quarterback is the 6th pick in the draft.
A worse team. They're in a worse situation, at least not for 2020, not moving forward. But they have a worse situation in 2020 than the Minnesota Vikings. They have the same fucking record. And I see people calling for Anthony Lynn's head as the head coach. But I see Mike Zimmer saying, Mike Zimmer is a great coach. We need to move forward with him because he's the guy. Blah, blah. No. The Vikings are not absolved of being discussed as being shitty as these other shitty teams are. Because all these other shitty teams are just a one game away from being as shitty or as mediocre as the Vikings. So the Vikings are one win or one loss away from still being in those same categories. So
which is why all the starters are going to be playing on
100%. And that's
all of what you're saying is why all the starters are going to play in this game.
The Vikings
so that we don't fall into that
Jaguars fucking to overtime, bro. The Vikings took the Jaguars had the first overall pick, and they took the Vikings at home to overtime. The Carolina Panthers almost fucking beat the Vikings, and people are talking shit about Teddy and talking about shit about how bad that team is. All of these shitty teams that played the Minnesota Vikings this year gave them a fucking game. Or they beat their ass. Or they beat their ass in the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah,
and people are sitting here saying 2021 is the year for the Minnesota Vikings. I'm supposed to sit here and say, you're goddamn right it is. What?
That's what I don't get, guys. That's what I don't get because everybody thought the Vikings were secretly good at middle of the season, right? It was sort of like this, that, and They matched up well with Green Bay and Lambeau. We talked about that. That ended up being okay. They matched up well in this. I got to look back. I haven't figured this out. So the last time the Vikings won in Lambeau but lost in Green Bay, lost at home, I believe I'm trying to remember. It was 2015 with Teddy.
2015. Yeah.
The last time they won in Chicago but lost to the Bears at home was, I believe, 1999 with Jeff George and Randall Cunningham at quarterback. I can't remember. I actually have to look. The last time they did the same to both teams was actually pretty funny. But it shows you just how – can you imagine 2 years ago thinking to yourself, the Vikings can beat the Bears with a certain quarterback but can't beat them with Mitch? Right?
That first Bears game, that was one of the worst offenses we've seen in the entire season from the Chicago Bears. That fucking team is going to make the playoffs.
Yes, because the Bears are so great because they're like, holy shit, our quarterbacks suck. Let's redesign the entire offense mid-season to prop this guy up. The Vikings would never fucking do that. They'd never do that.
And everybody gives Trubisky shit for the games that he's, so they played Minnesota, Jacksonville, Houston, and Detroit were the defenses that they got to face. And everybody's like, well, Mitch Trubisky low-key sucks because he's done well against those teams are on the Vikings schedule too. Like, you know what I mean? Tennessee is ass on defense. The Vikings did enough, but their defense wasn't good enough. Houston, same thing, won by a touchdown. Detroit, same. I mean, that was one game the Vikings actually extended on the other team. But you guys are right. I mean, it's tough because when you look at this team, are they intentional about winning the Super Bowl? And the answer is no. The answer is categorically no. The answer, they're intentional about getting to the next season alive.
They don't know how. What I've learned is they don't know how to take that approach. They're like they sit in their meetings and they're like, how do we get to the Super Bowl? How do we take next year to make a Super Bowl run? And they say, let's go get an offensive guard. Like, that's what they're going to do. They're going to say, let's go get a left guard. Let's go get a defensive tackle, and let's go, like, they're going to, like, do the little things that they think the minor holes that they think they have.
It's tactics, but it's not strategy. Like,
no, it's not strategy. They're just going to plug holes.
Moves. Yeah.
They're going to plug holes and say, this is our strategy. We just need to plug the holes of our weaknesses, and that's a wrap, and we'll be straight. And it hasn't worked. We'll just continue to see the every other year bullshit. And I've just been over it. I've just been over this.
We will not continue to see the every other year bullshit. That's what I'm trying to say. Is like, I hate to break it, but I look at the schedule. I look at how we played against good teams this year, and in my opinion, if they take this plug hole strategy, 2021 is a wrap, and they're looking below 500 again. In my opinion, I mean, consequences are going to come sooner or later. They're going to erode like the Falcons eroded from Super Bowl contention right out to last place in the NFC. So go ahead.
Well, I think it's tragic too, in the sense that it doesn't have to be this way. They're not the Jets. They're not the Jacksonville Jaguars. There's talent on the team. If you reconstitute it in a way that is a winning strategy, they can be a winner. That's I think what we're frustrated about. If this was the 0-2 Vikings coming off of the year that Corey Stringer died or whatever, like then yeah, okay, you have to rebuild. But this team actually has winning components to it, which makes it kind of tilting.
All right, so Drew asked a question. So let's answer Drew's question because he fired it out there. If it was us, and we were looking to pick the right players for the Vikings in that range that the Vikings may be picking, maybe as early as 9, somewhere to like the mid-teens. Maybe we don't even have to hone in on a specific player because the draft is random. We don't know everyone who's declared yet. And coming off 2020, it's just a crazy year, generally speaking.
There are 100 players that are guaranteed to go top 50.
Tell me, what positions are you going to be looking for in the draft if you're looking to have the Vikings adopt a strategy that is more about maximizing the quarterback position and the positions that Eric talked about for us earlier. Like, what are we doing at that slot to and maybe some names that you've heard that may be going in that range?
Yeah, well, so what I try to do in the offseason is I try to look at both scenarios for the Minnesota Vikings. I try to look at them in a way that we're going to talk about right now of what I think would be the best approach, the way that they should go, or at least for my opinion, I think they should go. And then there's the what do I think they're actually going to do approach. And they never line up because what they actually do never seems to be what they probably should do, except for Justin Jefferson, because they put themselves in that situation. Jeff Gladney, they put themselves in that situation. So what they should do, in my opinion, my whole thing has always been take a shot at a quarterback. Like, no matter what they do, Kirk Cousins has played well the last 2 seasons, albeit not being asked to throw a lot. Like we've talked about, he's like ranked 24th or something in the league in throwing in attempts or some shit like that. Like, I'm not saying Kirk couldn't do better throwing more, but they're not asking him to throw more. So I don't need to pay my quarterback that much money if you're going to ask him to do what they're asking him to do. There's just no point in that. That's why the philosophies are never going to match up, but I'm not going down that road. So my first thought would be to say, go take a swing at a quarterback. Go, like, for the first time in franchise history, go take a swing at a quarterback when it's not considered a need, because you're looking, like to Flip's point, you're looking to the future, you're looking beyond, because 2021, it might not be it. And just saying you're going to fill the defensive tackle, the left guard, couple positions here and there as the holes, and those are going to be what propels you to a playoff run. Like, we don't know that. That's just going to be their approach. Take a shot at a quarterback. And if you're not going to do that, I would say trade back. At least then gain additional assets, find ways to like help create more added talent to your roster rather than thinking that one specific player you're taking at 13, let's say the safety, cornerback, it shouldn't be a safety. Let's say a cornerback, whatever position it ends up being, like at least find a way to turn that one pick into multiple picks, and then you can at least help yourself out because you don't have a second round pick that you fucking wasted away. At least take that type of approach if you're not going to take a swing at quarterback, because we'll sit here until we're blue in the face to say they should take a wide receiver because this is another wide receiver talented draft. They're not going to do that. They haven't done it. Until they do it again, I'm never going to expect them to do it. They're not going to go out there and say, oh, Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, Rashad Bateman. They're not going to go out there and say those are the guys that we need to add to our offense to make ourselves better, because that's not what they want to do. They're okay with riding with 2 elite receivers and whatever else is behind them. They've been doing that since 2015, and they're fine with it. So I don't expect that to be the approach. Do I think it should be? Hell yeah. They should be running more 11, 10 personnel. Let's spread them out a little bit more. That'll help Dalvin Cook more than people want to realize, but people don't want to talk about it. But that's fine. So for me, it's either quarterback or trade back. That's where I'm at with it.
Eric, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I said prior to the season that they should trade Harrison Smith.
Yep.
You know, I think Harrison Smith probably on the block. I think one of the problems with the Stephon Diggs trade was that his contract was so reasonable. And I think, the part of me that wants to trade Danielle Hunter doesn't actually, like, I pull back on that instinct because his deal is so reasonable. It's also why the Yannick Ngakoue trade, by the way, was really stupid, because if Yannick Ngakoue blew up this year, he would have garnered a contract that would have been bigger than Danielle Hunter. And I would imagine any person in the Minnesota building knows Danielle Hunter's better than Yannick Ngakoue, and hence you would have had to pay 2 players for the price of one, with that trade. That was kind of the tricky thing. So I think you keep Hunter because he's relatively inexpensive. He's coming off of an injury, all that kind of stuff. His value's not that low, but I do think you trade Harrison.
That dude is going to ask for a trade if he doesn't get a new contract.
Yeah,
not saying the Vikings have to give it to him, but there is no way if I'm Danielle Hunter, I'm saying training camp, I'll see you then.
We're getting too far ahead of ourselves.
I agree. I agree.
I do think you trade assets. You trade assets that other teams want. You accumulate players. To Miles' point, I think you draft a quarterback. high and you say, look, our goal for 2021 is to sort things out, right?
Yep.
It was, same thing with Kansas City in 2017, same thing, with Eagles in 2016 when they traded Bradford to the Vikings. Same goal for the Rams in 2017, et cetera, et cetera. You draft a quarterback in the first round, and you figure things out. Can this player help him?
You can still be a playoff team if you draft a quarterback in the first round. Like, everybody's gonna freak out and say, "Oh, there's no way this team." Like, the first round is one. It's one round. It doesn't change what you do in free agent. It shouldn't change what you do in free agency. It shouldn't change what your still approach is going to be for 2021 if you still want to be a competitive team, which if Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman are here, they're going to have to be because they're coaching and, working for their jobs. So, like, that's why I've said I don't expect those things to happen because it'll all be about 20. Like, this is what it's been. It'll all be about this singular year, 2021, because that's all they have. And it doesn't matter beyond that because they need to focus on the now. And that's why I think the Yannick Ngakoue trade happened. Why they gave Kirk Cousins a contract extension this year. Like, they did things where they were like, we need to make sure for ourselves we have a future too. And I'm not disagreeing with that from their end at all, but there's no future in terms of what the team build and philosophy looks like because they don't know what to do anymore. I truly don't think they know how to get out of this mediocre hole that they put themselves in.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I mean, that's the problem, though, that, like, the Vikings fans, I think the smart ones want a Super Bowl. The Vikings, brain trust and some other fans want to stay relevant, right? Like, I think that's the real rub is that, like, most of us are hoping for something that the Vikings don't have as an objective, right? And unfortunately, that's really frustrating.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bring us on.
Yeah, so on the subject of who to draft and the offseason in general, I think we need to remind ourselves that there's a salary cap here. So when looking at the 2017 and 2018 offseason, we all knew that 2019, 2020 were going to be quiet off seasons. 2019 was a pretty quiet offseason. I mean, what did we do? We signed a defensive tackle and then we brought back our kicker, our punter, and our fullback. Same thing's probably going to happen in 2020. It's not going to be a very loud offseason. When you talk about trading assets away, that's also going to be a lot harder to do because they do have cap issues. So it's probably just going to be, maneuver around, try to trade for picks, maybe trade back. But the right answer is like what Miles and Eric said. It's quarterback number one. It's trade a bounty of picks for Jamar Chase, number two. And then number three, outside of quarterback and receiver, you might be able to convince me that edge rusher is something that they need to address high to put a guy next to Daniil. But that's it. Oh my God! Do not draft a cornerback. I'm going to have to take a month off the pod if they go any defensive position in the first round. Any defensive position outside of edge rusher. Like if they draft some safety in the first round, it's like why?
I think the interesting thing is that the Vikings have been weird about how they've invested in that position. To me, the Vikings should probably take this season and buy a bunch of $7.5 million corners, if that makes sense. Because
get a William Jackson, go get someone like that. I said that they should go call the New Orleans Saints and say, hey, what do you want for Marshawn Lattimore? Because the Saints can't afford anybody. They're going to be in the worst cap situation in the history of the NFL. Go call about any of their valuable players and say that are making money and say, hey, what do you want for?
But you guys know why the Saints are good on defense, right? Like you look at the Saints defense. Patrick Robinson, who is a guy the Vikings almost drafted in 2010, is their backup nickel. He's a veteran. He's a starter in this league. DJ Swearinger is their backup free safety. He's a starter in this league. Von Bell. They let Von Bell go, but they have DJ Williams
bouncing around the league.
Yeah, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. You need basically two lines of defensive backs in the NFL to have success. And the problem is the Vikings said, okay, we can have a good defense if X, Y, and Z all happen when all of those are coin flips. Or the Saints are like, well, we already know Lattimore's okay. We already know Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's good. We all already know, and then if one of those things don't work out, we have two other backup plans. The Vikings left themselves with no outs, as far as if Mike Hughes didn't work, if Gladney and Dantzler needed time to emerge, if and I think that's the problem is though, like the coverage versus passer thing, that doesn't necessarily mean you just draft a bunch of corners high. What it means is you draft a lot of corners and you spend money in free agency on a lot of corners and hope that the best three end up being good enough for you to win with. The Vikings have shown right now that like they might not be able to evaluate the position that well.
Whew. Well, that's a glaring indictment. And that is a fantastic way to wrap up the show, gentlemen. It has been a pleasure. Viewers, thanks for all of the wonderful things in the comments. Flip beat me to it. Donnie, stop trying to make it happen. It's not going to happen. Stop trying to make it a thing. Eric, thanks for making your triumphant return. It has been a pleasure. Mary, Drew, everybody out there whose questions we did or didn't get to, we appreciate y'all. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And Quarter Mike, everybody, thanks for coming through. And there he is. We got a little circle of Dave spinning around. Now he's in the middle. Dave, bring us home. You're on mute again, Dave. Every week. This has become a thing now. It's become a weekly shtick.
Two buttons. All right. Hey, I just want to thank everybody for joining us in the chat. Obviously, I've been monitoring that. I also want to thank you guys for putting on a show of In the Huddle where we discuss some Viking topics. Some of them are a little bit sensitive, but they need to be discussed.
Was that about the showering or something else?
Well, it could be the showering, the record, everything. It doesn't matter. Anyways, join us tomorrow night when we have Climbing the Pocket, the original, live at 9 p.m. Eastern, as we continue to bring you Vikings content the way you want it, the way you like it, and raw. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Stay healthy, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Play the music.
Thank you for watching or listening. As always, if you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And if you're listening to the podcast, please rate us on your favorite aggregator. SKOL, everybody.